Happy Saturday. It's November 2nd, 2024, and you are listening to Morning Meeting. I'm Ashley Baker in London.
And I'm Michael Haney in New York City.
Contrary to what one might see on the front pages of most major newspapers, there are at least a few things going on other than the U.S. election. Taylor Swift is wrapping up her Eras tours with shows in Indianapolis this weekend. Gisele Bündchen is having another baby. Yes, this is what happens when one reads a lot of New York Post. And locals in Bar Harbor, Maine are raging against the arrival of cruise ships into its bucolic harbor, as our own Claire Malot reports in this week's issue of Airmail. As always, we are the antidote to the stressful and perplexing news of the day. We have a great issue and a great episode in store.
Exactly. As you know, there's a lot at stake of this election, and Graydon and Alessandra will be here to join us to tell us about the lasting legacy of the baby boom generation is this election. They'll explain it all and give us their thoughts on where we're going. Then, Claire Malot will join us with her shocking report that reveals how an employee at an elite boarding school downloaded photos from 70 underage female students' laptops. And finally, the artist Pete Mondrian is seen as one of the supreme artists of the 20th century. Yet, in many ways, he's as elusive and walled off as his revolutionary paintings. But a new biography pulls back the curtain on the Dutch painter and the author. Nicholas Fox Weber is going to join us to share his insights. So, Ashley, where would you like to begin today?
No question, Michael. We need Graydon and Alessandra on here. Graydon Carter and Alessandra Stanley are the co-editors of Airmail. Welcome, Graydon and Alessandra.
Good morning.
Hello. So guys, basically this is all your fault. I mean, Trump is the great legacy of the baby boomers, and please explain to us how this happened.
Graydon, it's really your fault. So
No. I'm older. No, the baby boomers it was the generation with the greatest opportunity, the greatest promise. They made more promises of how they would fix the world. And, the lasting gift to the world is this election and Donald Trump, who was born the first year of the baby boom, 1946, but then also great hope in the fact that Kamala Harris is born the last year of the baby boom, 1964. So we've offered great people to the nation and done great. We've got Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Martin Short, the Obamas. They're all baby boomers, but so is Trump, and that is our lasting gift.
And there's no redemption. It's not like he has some redeeming features of his generation. He's all the worst qualities without even scintilla of things that you like about the baby boom, even if it's just the music. I mean, he doesn't even play baby boomer music at his concerts, or at his rallies, rather. I guess there are more concerts now.
Well, they won't let him. The musicians won't let him. Also, you've never seen him in blue jeans. He has none of the cool factor, such as it is of the rest of the baby boomers. It's just all the craven graspingness and narcissism of the worst elements of the baby boomer generation.
So you're welcome.
Graydon, you've been all too aware of Trump for decades. You have famously had entanglements with him in the past that have delighted all of us at Airmail, as well as your many fans around the world. But how are you feeling that we're here yet again, waiting to see if this guy's going to win the presidential election?
Well, let's remember, this is not a politician who has been on a hot streak. Trump has won one election in his life. And I think that if I was a betting man, I would bet for Kamala Harris. He is doing everything in his power to alienate vast sections of the populace. And this is a country I don't recognize, one that would go for Donald Trump right now, as given what he stands for and what he says he will do.
And yet the polls are saying he has a really good shot at it. So
the polls are polls. And also, I mean, just think about it. If the Puerto Rican community and women got out and every single one of them voted, the election would be in the tank for Kamala Harris.
Well, Graydon, I'm glad you brought up this rally because, it seems like one of Trump's defining characteristics is that he can't be shamed. He also, nothing that he does really shocks us anymore. I mean, but how did you feel when you watched the coverage of that rally at Madison Square Garden? What did it represent?
Well, it's even uglier than I expected. I mean, I've known Trump since 1982, and at Spy Magazine, we won his ire by referring to him as a short-fingered vulgarian. And the Bulgarian thing was obviously incredibly correct, but so's the short finger thing because his hands are too small for his body, and it drives him crazy, and it delights political cartoonists for the last, say, since 2016. That was the ugliest gathering of people probably since 1939 at the old Madison Square Garden.
I mean, and we also saw a rare apology from the Trump camp about those comedians' remarks about the Puerto Rican community.
I don't think they apologized. I think Trump said, I don't know who he, as usual, I have no idea who he was and how he ended up at my rally, but Joe Biden's the one who should be castigated for calling people garbage. I mean, it's so nuts.
No, also they approved of the comedian, and obviously they knew the speech because it was on the teleprompter. And with Joe Biden, I mean, at this point, they should just mute him if that's possible, to mute a person live. He caused all sorts of problems with that comment because it gave them a chance to dig themselves out of their own garbage hole.
As we're here on the cusp of the election, it's been, such a raucous moment for the Democrats with Biden stepping down or being forced to step down and the elevation of Harris. How do you think they've handled all of this?
You mean the Harris campaign?
Just the Democratic machine in general. Are we in a better place now than you thought we would be when Biden was debating Trump just a few short months ago?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they get full credit for having pulled this out of the hat, very quickly. She's done a really great job of sort of stepping up. We may not be thrilled with everything she's done, but consider the alternatives. And I think the ground, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are in Pennsylvania doing canvassing and phone banks and stuff. And I think the Democratic operation on the ground is really, really good. It would have been anyway, but you wouldn't have had volunteers for Biden. I just don't think people would have turned out, new voters would have turned out to volunteer for Biden. Whereas Harris is getting at least a lot of women and young people.
Yeah, no, as hand-wringing as the Democrats are right now, you can only imagine the hand-wringing. Biden is still the nominee. It'd be catastrophic. It's time to retire him. He's too old. So's Trump. Trump's too old. 78, you don't have the energy or the mental abilities that you do when you're in your 50s and 60s. I don't.
Not true, Graydon.
We disagree.
We fundamentally disagree. But I'm almost afraid to ask, but what is the mood like right now in the Carter and Stanley households? How are we feeling?
Well, in my household, everyone's medicated, so we feel fine.
Well, I'm not married to a psychiatrist, and we have alcohol, but it's too early in the morning right now. I don't know. I don't know about you, Alessandra. I'm modestly optimistic. And because I love America, I'm unlike the three of you. I immigrated here. I chose to live in this country, and I love it. I love New York, and I see a better America out there than Trump does. I have great faith in the American character and American people.
So hopefully, Graydon, we're going to end up on the right side of history. If not on Wednesday morning, at least in the following weeks, as all the votes are counted.
I think as much as we don't want Trump to win, I think we can survive another Trump term.
How are you guys handling election night? Are you going to be having parties, watching it alone, again, heavily medicated?
I'm not making that mistake again. I'm not watching it with anybody because 2016, it was over 8:30. The hors d'oeuvres weren't even cold.
We had the same thing. We had a lot of friends over that night. We even put bunting up in the kitchen where we were going to eat. And by 8:30, people started drifting off. It was one of the most depressing nights of all. I think most sane people will watch the TV coverage on their own, just so the tears and the mascara when it's running, they won't do it in front of their friends or loved ones.
I think, to go back to your point about him being the consummate baby boomer, I love the point you guys make is that, Tom Wolfe coined me generation, and he is the ultimate me. It's all about him. So it's, but this will be the test.
Completely encapsulates all the worst aspects of the baby boom generation. In a certain way, Kamala Harris, she represents the best aspects of the baby boom generation. So it's a coin with two sides, and hopefully it lands heads up rather than short fingers.
Thank you, Graydon and Alessandra, and rest assured we're going to be trying to talk to you next week as all of this unfolds. Okay, Michael. Well, I think now everyone knows how the editors of Airmail are going to be spending election night, which is to say, at least in the case of me, heavily medicated, fully lubricated, and frankly, I'm going to be on a plane from New York back to London. So if I wake up in the UK and all hell has broke loose, at least I'll be in a separate country.
Well, you'll be high above it all, and maybe that's a good place to be. I'll be tucked under the covers somewhere.
I kind of like the idea of being at 30,000 feet over the ocean when, all of this stuff comes rolling in. But no, I think it's probably clear we're not going to know too much, at least on Wednesday. Certainly Trump is going to be celebrating no matter what, even if it's a landslide for Harris. So we shall see. But Michael, let's transition. If you find that you're still in the market for more villains, Clara Malo, the investigations editor here at Airmail, has one for you. An IT employee at a very elite boarding school in Connecticut has been accused of downloading photos from 70 underage female students. Clara's here to explain exactly what happened and how he got away with it for so long. Welcome, Clara.
Thanks for having me.
So Clara, Kent, Connecticut, such a bucolic town. It seems like the type of place where nothing bad would ever happen. But as you report in your story today, there's a very troubled character who ended up at its boarding school, Kent School, which is one of the most prestigious in the region. Take us there.
Yeah, so we think of Kent School as you said, it'd be very bucolic boarding school that's been home to some of elite in politics and in Hollywood. Lana Del Rey went there. But in the last 2 years, they've dealt with a pretty major security breach. There was a longtime member of their IT department for over 20 years who was able to steal photos from students' computers. And for boarding school, almost every single student is underage. So when a student, and predominantly a girl, would bring her computer to get something fixed, he would be able to download this software and, through that, basically hack back into her computer and steal photos. And so in February of 2023, a female employee noticed her own photo on, his name is Daniel Cleary, so Cleary's computer, and actually reported it to the school. And from then, the police were brought in and a full-on investigation was started. And I believe it's almost 100 students, especially young girls, are now victims of this security breach.
And during what time period was this happening, Clara?
So they don't know exactly when it started. I think that information will come out soon. But according to the headmaster, it wasn't going on for the whole 20-something years that Dan Cleary was at the school. A lot of the girls were in the class of 2022, so it seems maybe in the last 4 or 3 years to have been taking place.
So the guy was the IT person. One of the employees discovers it. What was the students' reaction to this and their parents?
So the head of school, Mr. Hirschfeld, who actually was head of school at St. Paul's boarding school when they had their sexual assault reckoning, said to me that he was actually surprised by how upset and violated the students did feel, that it really rocked the community, maybe more than he even could have imagined. But, you put yourself in the shoes of a 16, 17-year-old girl who now knows that a 40-something-year-old man has access to her photos and still to this day doesn't know exactly which photos. It's obviously very scary. And unlike a typical day school, these kids live at boarding school. Their teachers are also in certain ways acting as their parents. And so it's a violation and a breach of trust in the most extreme terms, given that they're living at the school.
And how have the alumni communities responded to this, Clara? I mean, what's the blowback?
The thing that actually was surprising to me is that this story has been kept really quiet. A lot of alumni, a lot of former board members who were still quite involved had no idea when I reached out that this had taken place. So the school has seemingly done a good job of only telling the people who are directly involved. And up until a few weeks ago, no one really knew about it outside of those people. But a former student decided to post a TikTok video explaining the situation, I think out of just frustration that there was potentially the option for Cleary to avoid prison time and do an accelerated rehabilitation program instead. And, definitely some of the students I've spoken to who are involved said they just feel like there hasn't been enough communication. They haven't been kept up to date enough. And so now there's definitely more pressure on the school for complete transparency, and there's going to be a federal case against Cleary. And so I think as that happens, the story will kind of open up more to the public.
I mean, Clara, I've got a child at boarding school, and it seems like perhaps I'm overly sensitive to it, but I feel like we're hearing these stories about, children away from their families being taken advantage of in various ways and means more and more often. Is that really happening? Is this part of the age of technology, or is it just an oversensitivity?
I mean, I definitely think we've heard for decades about boarding school stories. And, you look at the sexual assault case at St. Paul's and what was normalized to then, people putting their foot down. I think that our understanding of technology seems to lag behind a case like this. And so the school very quickly was able to update to be extra careful to make sure something like this can't happen. But the headmaster and the assistant head of school both said to me that, it wasn't like they had outdated systems. Schools just maybe weren't prepared for something like this. And they just always need to be thinking ahead and assuming that they're going to be nefarious actors. I mean, you're kind of at a disadvantage when it's your IT guy that is trying to hack your system. This was the guy that was in charge of their network. So if anyone was going to be able to do it, it probably was him.
What is his future looking like at this point?
So they're waiting for a federal prosecutor to be assigned to the state. The state attorney's office is very aware of the case. And as you can imagine, getting a ton of calls from very angry moms. And so we're waiting to see how that plays out on campus. I think that there's going to be just more of a conversation about this. And the school has learned a lesson in terms of just making sure that they're talking about these situations enough. I think students just want to feel heard and understood. And then from my understanding, the alumni involved are waiting to decide what kind of action they want to take. There definitely could be a case to take action against the school. And I don't think they are going to do that, but it's not off the table. But if there's a federal case, I think that the punishments are much more extreme because he was charged, it's called computer crimes number 1 and computer crimes number 2 are the charges against him on the Connecticut state level. So the charges on the federal level will probably be greater. According to the headmaster, he's looking at years of prison time.
Well, Clara, thank you so much. What a sad and interesting and important story. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Michael, this story just shocks on every level. It's how are you supposed to keep children safe? It's basically impossible. You pay someone $70,000 a year and expect them to take care of your kids. And it turns out, no, they're just stealing their personal photos for their own use.
Yeah, quite chilling. Quite chilling.
All right. On that note, let's move away from true crime and into the world of art. We've got Nicholas Fox-Weber is the director of the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation, the author of 15 books, the founder of La Corsa, which is the charity that builds infrastructure and schools. He's in Senegal. He's an art historian, and also the author of the new book, We Can't Stop Reading. It's called Mondrian, His Life, His Art, His Quest for the Absolute. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
This is an artist who you were very familiar with before, but tell us a little bit about sort of his place in the canon and why this new book is so enlightening and illuminating.
Well, his place in the canon, Ashley, is really based on the tremendous originality of his paintings with primary colors and grids established in black horizontal and vertical lines against white backgrounds. They have such a universal resonance that they've been used on everything from architectural facades to shoes to dresses to tabletops.
This is an artist that many people think that they know, but why was he such a rich subject for you as a biographer in terms of his personal life as well as his artistic legacy?
Well, he was a very rich subject because I had an image that came to me through a psychoanalytic study of Mondrian that treated his abstract paintings as walls, and he created these beautiful, vibrant walls because he had something to conceal behind them. And I buy into that notion that there's a reason for these exquisite facades, and it behooved me as a biographer to find out what might be on the other side.
And he deliberately left the personal out of his artwork. In your book, you have some theories as to why that may have been. What did you learn?
I think he left the personal out because he thought that there was something greater than the personal. He was a deeply philosophical man, very interested in the movement of theosophy as a young person, and he wanted to focus more on the universal, on what it was that would be timeless and what it was that could impact people all over the world, whatever language they spoke, whatever their private experience was. And in order to do that, it was necessary to set his personal self aside as less relevant than the creation, very much the way that someone like Mozart created his beautiful music without reference to his private experience.
You also report in your book that among the many extraordinary facts and factoids you came across is that one of his early girlfriends reported that his kisses lasted for up to 30 minutes. I mean, is that some sort of a record? Tell us about that.
I read this in letters written by the son of one of Mondrian's girlfriends, saying that when his mother was young and Mondrian was courting her, in Mondrian's studio, she actually timed his kisses because she was able to look out the window at a church steeple where there was a big clock, and that indeed they lasted that long. Now, there are many theories as to why someone would kiss for as long as 30 minutes, one of them being a certain awkwardness on the part of the person who is doing so. Another being, as my son-in-law put it, because he wasn't getting anything more. And I tend to subscribe to the notion that he was socially an extremely awkward human being.
Nick, one of the things that struck me, about him was, I love your psychological reading of The Walls, but listening to you here today and looking at the book, it also strikes me as a guy who was, in some ways, like the paintings, very compartmentalized in everything.
Yes.
He had all these little rooms walled off in a way as well. Is that a fair interpretation as well?
I think it is. He's someone who was very interested in order in his life. He had certain things that were important to him, and he screened out everything else. There might have been 2 occasions in his life when he ever stayed in a hotel room. He didn't travel. He lived alone in a very neat studio where on the walls he put colored pieces of cardboard that he could move around, changing the composition so that he lived really inside an abstraction. He had certain things in life that he very much enjoyed. One of them was ballroom dancing, and he always found the time to do that. When he moved to New York, he went to Roseland Dance Hall a great deal. He liked dancing in jazz clubs in Harlem. As a young man, he used to go to the ballroom of a fancy hotel near where he had his studio in the Netherlands, but things were kept separate. And as you say, Michael, he very much had everything in its place. This was true also of his clothing. He wore white in the studio. It always looks impeccable. And then he dressed very beautifully in double-breasted suits when he went out into the world. Appearance and order were essential. With the compartmentalization, it's an eccentricity, but he had a system for doing dishes after dinner, which was that if he had a guest there, he would not wash the dishes that evening, but he would let the dirty dishes accumulate in the sink. And he had enough dishware and flatware so that he could do this for 3 days without washing a thing. And then on the 3rd day, wash all the dishes, because that way you utilized a minimal amount of water.
Nick, you've written so many biographies of important artists. Where does Mondrian fit into that for you as a biographer, in terms of your other work?
I've written fairly substantial biographies of the painter Balthus and the artist Le Corbusier and some other people. And for me, Mondrian is one of the greatest masters. I would equate him with Le Corbusier in architecture. He's unequaled as a visual artist. The art dealer, Sidney Janis, who worked with Picasso and Arp and Braque and others, said that Mondrian was the greatest artist of the last century. For me, it fits in to the degree that his art is so sublime, but also that after 12 years of working on his biography, he remains elusive.
Well, Nick, thank you so much, not only for sharing your insights with us, but also for this fabulous book. It's essential that everybody read it immediately.
There's only one place to discover a global snapshot of the current cultural scene: Airmail's Arts Intel Report. Our international research tool for what to do and where and when to do it is user-friendly, continuously updated, and meticulously curated. Arts Intel is handy at home, on the road, and when you're planning your next trip. It also includes indispensable lists of restaurants and hotels in key cities around the world, recommended by our well-traveled experts. Explore Arts Intel at airmail.news/arts-intel, and be sure to sign up for our Week in Culture newsletter, which is published every Wednesday afternoon at airmail.news/WIC. I'm Chris Garrett, Airmail Deputy Editor, and I never leave home without it. Bon voyage.
Okay, Mike, now after a somewhat depressing first half of the episode, this put me in a better mood.
Art always puts you in a better mood because it's the eternal, and it sort of gives you, life is short, art is long. So just focus on that the next few weeks.
Perfect. Well, on that note, it is the weekend. We've never needed escapism more than now, and I know you have some suggestions for us.
I've got one, and I think you're going to agree with me, and it's season 2 of The Diplomat.
Love it.
Love it. It just went up this week on Netflix. For those of you who never saw season 1, what are you waiting for? This is the one that stars Kerry Russell and Rufus Sewell as Americans working at the American Embassy in Great Britain. I have to say, I know the whole season just dropped on Netflix. I'm one of those guys who kind of parses it out one at a time. So I've only watched the first one. And I have to tell you, Ashley, I don't know if you've seen it, but I kind of think, I had this thought the other day. We've been celebrating the 25th anniversary of West Wing this past fall. I kind of feel this has the new West Wing vibe. It's like a lot of adrenaline, a lot of talk, a lot of action across the country and with politics and State Department intrigue. So I'm kind of all in. It had that cliffhanger last season. It starts up right out of the gate again. So I don't know, have you seen it yet?
Only watched the first episode of the second season, but I agree with you. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that it could eclipse The Americans as my favorite Kerry Russell political thriller, and yet here we are.
So, we'll both be following it in the next few weeks. I hope you guys at home do. But Ashley, what do you have for us this week?
Well, Michael, I've been escaping into the past this week with Halloween on Thursday. I was watching a lot of Hitchcock movies. I don't know, it seems because these are movies we think we all know intimately because we've seen them so many times. But I watched The Birds again for the first time in probably 20 years. Have you seen that recently?
It's funny. Brooke and I watched it in the last couple of years. It's fantastic. I think it was always one of his sort of like lesser films. I think it's so damn good.
Hippie Hedren stars as a socialite from San Francisco who follows a guy up to a town bodega, and all of a sudden these birds start attacking out of nowhere. I forgot how graphic it was. I mean, it's really, talk about a horror film. I mean, you really get a lot of blood and a lot of, gorged out various body parts. I mean, it's wild for the time. And I was reading back at some of we need Sam Castner to do like a full history of the birds for us. But I mean, they employed 25,000 birds, to use. And can you imagine the training involved? Anyway, such a great film. And one I'm really glad that I watched. I feel like, I'm always talking about Rear Window and To Catch a Thief and, all those other great North by Northwest, all those other great thrillers. But The Birds doesn't really get its due. I think next I'm going to watch Marnie.
Oh my God. Marnie. Have you ever seen it? Oh.
I've seen it. Yeah. And it's that was really when Tippi Hedren and Hitchcock really had their falling out, was I think during the filming of that. And anyway, but so lots of Hitchcockian moments going on, but it's a nice escape at this particular moment in the political news cycle.
2 great ways to spend your weekend or maybe the weeks ahead, just sort of tuning out the world.
Indeed. Well, on that note, we wish you a restful and restorative weekend. Try not to stress, but if you do, call Alessandra. She has drugs. Michael, will you please read us out?
Absolutely. And be sure and vote. Morning Meeting is produced by Airplay Productions and edited by Jesse Cannon. Our coders are Graydon, Carter, and Alessandra Stanley. Our chief operating officer is Bill Keenan. And our deputy editors are Ashley Baker, Chris Garrett, Nathan King, Julie Vitale, and Ash Carter. Our CMO is Emily Davis, and our music supervisor is Randall Poster. The theme music is The Cute Monster by the Buddy Collette Quintet. A new edition of Airmail is published every Saturday, so please subscribe and enjoy all of our stories on airmail.news, which we update every day. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Airmail Weekly. We will be back here next Saturday with another edition of Morning Meeting. But in the meantime, be sure to subscribe at Spotify or Apple Music. But most of all, thank you again for joining us.